So, Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop RPG. RPG meaning role-playing game. You create a character. The character sheet in front of you gives you all their important information. Their stats, which is how strong they are, how fast they are, what attacks they can do, if they can use magic. And it's kind of like live theater. For the time when you play, you become your character. You can give them a funny accent, or a unique speech pattern. You can give them weird quirks or mentalities.
I forgot what charisma means.
Charisma is how charming or witty you are. It's...
Oh, that's a 0 for me.
Me too.
You'll be rolling your stats, because remember, you become your character when you play. Some people like to become the exact opposite of what they are. If you're not strong, some people like playing someone who's super strong. If you feel you're not charming, some people like to play someone with a high charisma. It's whatever you want to do. Once your character is made, enter a world designed by the Dungeon Master, the person running your game, and you go on adventures. You get to fight monsters, save people. The extent to what the game is changes from game to game, Dungeon Master to Dungeon Master. Some people like political intrigue, some people like monster hunting. It's all what you and your DM want to do. So we're going to go over it, but we're going to stick to the player's handbook for now. And in here are different races for you to play. Human, elf, dwarf, tieflings and dragonborn. And there's different classes. Your race determines your background and stuff like that. Your class determines your fighting style and the way you live. For instance, you might be a cleric. Think of them like kind of like a priest. They wield the magic of the gods. Or maybe you're a wizard. You wield the arcane magic, pure and raw. Or maybe you're a fighter. You don't do any of that weird magic stuff, you hit someone with a hammer.
That's me.
There's all different kinds of classes and styles, each one with their different abilities. We'll go over all of them in detail when we build characters together. The cleric is your primary support character. They have the biggest amount of healing and support spells, though the bard and druid both have access to those, as well as a little bit from the ranger and the paladin. First thing we always want to go over is the dice and dice terminology, because in this game everything is ruled by the dice rolls. So we're going to go over each dice one at a time. First thing to notice is that anytime you're reading one of the books, it's going to say something like 1d4, 2d6. The first number means how many dice. The D prefix just stands for dice, and the next number is how many sides. So 1d4 is a single 4-sided dice. It is this little pyramid couch rock kind of thing. All right. This one is mostly used for very small things like daggers, slings, darts.
Light hammers.
Yep, those kind of things. They're also used for very small creatures like fairies, because they're tiny. The next dice up would be your d6. Right? It's a 6-sided dice. It's your basic standard dice. Right? This is one of the more common ones used. It's the hit dice for your primary casters, and it's one of the most common damage dice. The d8, 8-sided dice. The d10, 10-sided dice. The unique thing about the d10 is it comes with a partner called the d100. When you roll this one and this one together, it becomes what's called the percentile set. This is almost never used. This is only used on certain very specific roll tables, or in the rare case of using one of the cleric's most powerful but not always the best abilities. Clerics can call down to their god for aid, and you have to roll this.
That's like a teleportation stuff or something?
No, teleportation you don't need to roll this for, unless special rules apply.
We got one more.
Alright.
This person.
Hey, Cameron.
Take a seat. Would you like to introduce yourself to the group?
Cameron Stevens.
How long have you been playing for, or if you've been playing at all, for you or not?
I don't know, like a year. So.
So we were just going over the different dice, just so everyone understands how the dice work. We'd gone through the percentile set to the d12, 12-sided dice, and the last one's the most important dice, the d20. This is the dice that determines everything. Whenever you want to see if you succeed on a task, you have to roll a d20, add whatever modifiers, and that tells you if you did it or not. Okay? All of you guys will at some point want to get your own dice sets if you want to play. Polyhedral or 7-piece dice sets are actually fairly cheap. You can go to Barnes & Noble, you can go to Walmart and other places and just get them for like $6, $7. You can buy them online. Most polyhedral dice sets are plastic, but you can get some dice that are metal. Whichever ones you use is your preference. Some people like the metal dice because they're heftier. Some people like the plastic dice because they roll better. Some people like dice that light up when you crit. You're going to want extras because spells require a lot of dice. That's either rolling one dice over and over and over again and adding it in your head, or rolling a bunch of dice together. Some of the other items you see in front of you, this is a battle grid, battle map, adventure grid. All it is a grid with 1 inch by 1 inch squares. In some parts of the game, it might be easier for you guys to work things out if you have the space to physically look at. All right. There are miniatures that you can purchase at different stores. Most of them come unpainted, but you can get some that are painted. Miniatures can be anything from one of your characters to one of your enemies.
Not character.
So some people like to use them a lot. Some people just use dice and say, this dice represents this creature. And you're not required to buy miniatures. You're not required to use battle maps. You can do this all in your head. That's a personal thing. You guys can see on the table there are a couple of trays. Those are just called roll trays. 2 of them are mine. One was handmade and given to me. The other one comes with my dice box. But those make it easier for rolling dice because they don't roll off the table like to go hunting for where did your dice go. Any questions on basic accompaniments? A lot of people believe that when you're playing D&D you need to dress up like wizards and have all this weird stuff. Props are fun. You don't need props. The basic items you need are a pencil, a notebook, your character sheet, some dice. These books can be found online. I prefer having a physical copy. And you just need the rest of your group. Everything else can happen in your head, it's all imagination. So don't worry about going broke trying to buy all the items you need. All you really need is some of that stuff. Now, do you have any questions before we get into this? Because I think the best place to start would be going into explaining the character sheet, talking about making characters, and then making them. I think that's one of the easiest ways to learn how this game functions and what all of this means, because this looks daunting at first, but once you go through it, it's actually a really simple game. No? Cool. So each of you guys were given a character sheet, a blank one. So you guys want to just pick that up and take a look at those. Each of your character sheets have different sections on them, the top scroll being your character's name. As I said, I think twice now to different people, this game's a role-playing game. You become your character that you make, so give them a name. You can give them a title, something because their name is hidden. But you become someone. Your class and level. Your class is your fighting style. It's your way of doing things, whether you're a holy warrior like a paladin, or someone who specializes in traveling through the woods like a ranger. In D&D, you have a level system. Everyone is level 1 through 20. And you usually start at level 1 and work your way up. As you level, you gain new abilities. You can do a bunch of really neat things. So you keep track of your level there. Your background. One of the things 5th edition implemented is a system where you pick a background, where you're from, what you used to do. And that background gives you unique abilities, special tools, things like that. So, and we'll go over backgrounds in a minute. The player name is your name. And you don't technically have to fill that out, but it's always good to keep your name on your character sheet so that if you lose it, someone can return it to you. Race. What race are you? Are you human? There's no problem with playing human. Some people will say that it's one of the more boring races, but I think it's one of the most fun because it has the most room. But you can also play an elf, a long-lived race, the dwarves. There are tieflings and dragonborn, halflings and gnomes. We'll go over them. For now, we're sticking with just the classes and races in the player's handbook. This game has a bunch of expanded books that add new races or types of races, new classes or subtypes. Right now we're just going to stick with the player's handbook, keep it a little less complicated. If we branch out into a game, like playing a campaign, then we can branch out of those other books. Your alignment. D&D exists with what's called an alignment system. It measures your connections to law versus chaos and good versus evil. Now what I mean by law versus chaos is you can be lawful. A lawful character follows the rules. They're someone who believes in order. You are neither lawful nor chaotic. You balance between the two. You'll follow the rules, you'll break the rules. You can be chaotic. A chaotic character is one who is not much for rules. They follow their own beliefs. They don't sit by the ways of law. Then there's good. If you're good, you're a good person. You do good deeds. You help people. A neutral character is neither good nor evil. They do both, or they always try to sit directly in the middle, teetering on that edge. And then there is evil, which I think is rather self-explanatory. You do bad things. You kick puppies. Just evil. When you combine those two, you get a 3x3 grid. For instance, if you are a lawful good character, you are a good person who follows the rules. You are someone who believes in order in society, that law is paramount. If you're lawful neutral, you're someone who follows the rule of law, regardless of if the rule of law is right. A lawful neutral person will follow the rules, even if the rule says to hurt people, because that's the law. Lawful evil are criminals who have a code of conduct. They are beings or people who, while evil, will run by a rule set. Lawful, neutral good. You are someone who is good, but you don't necessarily follow the rules or break the rules. You're someone who sits right in that middle. True neutral. You're not good, you're not evil, you're not lawful nor chaotic. You are the truest epitome of balance. Neutral evil. You're someone who is evil. You're not so lawful that you're governed by a code, but you're not so chaotic that you're just doing whatever. Again, neutral is that teetering line. Chaotic good. This is your Robin Hood character. This is someone who is a good person, but doesn't care if they break the law to be good. It's about being good beyond law. Chaotic neutral. Some people call this the selfish alignment. With a chaotic neutral character, you only care about usually yourself. You're a being who's all about true freedom beyond anything else. Chaotic neutral character is chaotic, and they'll do good or evil deeds as they see fit. And finally, chaotic evil. This is your Joker. This is a person who is evil for the sake of evil. They are wild and uncontrolled. If you talk to some players, your alignment defines how you act. In other players, you define your alignment. What I mean by this is, some people will say you should put down an alignment and then strive to be that alignment the entire time you play. So if you say you're neutral good, you must act neutral good the entire time. Another mental idea of how you play is that you play as your character and your alignment changes with you. If you are a neutral good character to start, but you start to dislike how the law is and you become more chaotic good, then your alignment shifts with you. How you guys want to run it is up to you. I'll tell you that I run by your alignment changes with you. It's more about being true to your character. So if your character is going to grow and do something that's not their alignment, still let them do it. This is like sort of like live theater, but also sort of like writing a book. You start out as a character at level 1, and you are the basic form. But as you travel with your party, as you fight monsters and villains, your person may change. They may have a change of heart. They may become a better person than they were before. Think of it like for the moment, while you're playing, you're not you, you're someone else. And how would those situations change you? If someone saves your life, but they're more of a criminal type, and you're someone who's lawful, maybe you slide a bit more towards neutral good because you realize that maybe the law isn't everything. Maybe you're someone who's truly good, but you keep doing good deeds and they mean nothing. So you start to do bad deeds and those get results, and you slide more towards neutrality. It's the idea that your experiences in the game will change your character, and you should go along with those changes. Some characters become evil, some evil characters become good. Some people begin as bastions of law and end up being Robin Hoods, beings of chaos. Some people don't change at all. They look at the world and go, I'm still perfectly as I am. It's just roll with it. So next thing we're going to go over are your stats. They are the series of blocks on the left side of your character sheet. Strength. It's how strong you are, as much as using this word in a sentence doesn't help define it. It is your ability to crush a tomato in your hand. Does that make sense? The higher your strength score, the more powerful of a person you are. The bigger things you can lift, the harder you can hit with strength-based weapons or things like that. Next is dexterity. That's how well you can throw a tomato. It's not about how powerful you are, it's about how nimble you are and how sure of hand you are. Right? A person with a higher dexterity, they're nimble, they're agile, they're good with their hands. They can pick locks, or they can do acrobatic movements, tumbles and rolls. Constitution, it's your strength of body. This determines your hit points. A person with a high constitution not only has a high amount of hit points, but it means that they can resist poison. If they eat a bad tomato, they won't get sick. Make sense? Intelligence. You would use strength to crush it first, and then you'd use your dexterity to throw it. But it probably wouldn't go very far. Intelligence is your bank of knowledge. It's how smart you are. A person with a high intelligence knows that a tomato is actually a fruit. Wisdom is your perception. It's your ability to view people and the world around you. It's not pure book knowledge, it's worldly knowledge. So wisdom is being wise enough to know that a tomato does not belong in a fruit salad.
Really?
And last is your charisma. This is your charm.
Cows can harvest tomatoes.
This is someone who can be persuasive or deceptive. It's how good you're lying, or how intimidating you are. It's a person who can use their force of personality as high charisma. A person with high charisma can somehow still sell you a tomato-based fruit salad. You guys make jokes about it, but honestly, that's one of the best examples I've ever seen for anyone explaining how these stats work. You guys will see something labeled saving throws next to your stats. It's a small box that has the 6 stats labeled. Different spells or effects require you to do something to protect yourself. A strength saving throw means you need to harden yourself against it. Dexterity saving throw means you need to jump out of the way. Constitution saving throw is just hope your body can weather it. Intelligence, wisdom, charisma. Different classes and different groups will have proficiency or the ability to use these. Right? So, if someone decides to cast everyone's favorite spell, Fireball, you basically make a 20-foot wide radius ball of fire appear somewhere. If you want to get out of that alive, you're going to have to dexterity or save your way out of it. Below that is your bank of skills. Based on your background, your race, and your class, you will gain proficiency with these skills. Acrobatics. It's the ability to do cartwheels and turns and move very nimbly. Animal handling is your ability to work with animals, to calm them down, to get them to do what you want. Arcana is your knowledge of magic. It's your way to feel around the world with magic. Athletics is strength-based movement. This is climbing and picking up heavy objects. Deception, your ability to lie and to hide things from other people. History, your knowledge of the world's history. Insight, that's your ability to read people, to tell if people are lying or to tell what kind of emotions they're having. Intimidation, your ability to scare someone or to force them into doing something you want them to do. Investigation, the ability to take the clues and put them together and find things. Medicine. This is used in a myriad of ways, one of them being putting together actual medicine, pharmacology. Other ones are used more for basic patching up injuries. Nature, your knowledge of plants and animals. Perception, your ability to see the world around you and notice its small details. Performance, your ability to sing or dance or play an instrument or maybe just act. Persuasion, to persuade someone. to convince them to go on your side with things. Religion. This is your knowledge of the gods. In D&D, there are a myriad of different deities that are all accepted to exist. With a person with a higher knowledge of religion, they know a lot about the gods, their stories, about undead and other monsters might count under religion. Sleight of hand. This is used often for pickpocketing. This is how quick and fast your hands are and how nimble they are. Stealth. Your ability to move quietly and to hide. And finally, survival. The ability to forage for food, track other creatures. When you make your character, you're going to write a backstory, most likely, or at least an idea of who they are and what they've done in their life, and you'll pick skills based on what they would have. When we get into making the character, you'll, one, pick a background. The background will give you 2 skills. So let's say you're an outlander. An outlander is someone who travels the wilds. They're someone who just travels through the woods for a living. You get athletics and survival for that one. Next, you pick your class. Your class will say, pick 2 skills from this list, and they'll give you a list.
Could be like that.
And then sometimes your race will give you classes too, and proficiencies with different skills.
For instance, like an orc would give you intimidation.
So you get to pick, but the number you get to pick is somewhat limited at first. Now the number of skills you can pick changes from your class. A barbarian, who's this wild Viking berserker, not a lot of skills. The rogue, however, who is your thief, your pickpocket, your assassin, they get a lot of skills. Depending on what class you are, it will change what skills you get and how many you get. A lot of different mythologies and lore have this being, this race known as the dwarves.
I've already got healing.
What they all have in common, depending on the lore and mythology, because most people think of dwarves, they think of Tolkien dwarves, is they are a stout race. They're very sturdy and strong and good craftsmen. Yep. If you look at the dwarves, they gain bonuses to their constitution, some to their strength. Many of them have skills with stonemasonry or blacksmithing. Dwarves live a fairly long time, and their culture is very set in stone. They live in clans, and it's their clan is the ultimate thing. If you're an adventurer for a dwarf, you're usually either someone who's left their home, someone who's embarking on a great quest for their clan or for something else. It doesn't have to be that way, though. Whatever reason you want your character to adventure, you can. Right? Dwarves come in 2 types, the hill and mountain dwarf. So, depending on what type of dwarf you are, changes your abilities. Next are the elves. These are mostly akin to the Tolkien style of elves. They're a tall, very thin race of beings that can live up to 800 years. They are very nimble and agile creatures. They're more chaotic than dwarves, who are a bit more on the lawful side, as they love the idea of freedom and expression. For elves, there are 3 types. The High Elf. These elves are masters of arcane magic. The Wood Elf chooses to be more of a warden of nature. While the High Elves live in big cities, the Wood Elves more often live in villages in the woods. And the last is the Dark Elf, or the Drow. These entities live in the Underdark, deep underground. Right? Unlike their other companions who are pale-skinned, Drow have skin that ranges from gray to black to a dark blue. And they have gifts due to their living in the Underdark for a long time. Drow are often villains and evil, but it doesn't mean you have to play them that way. You could have escaped your home in the Underdark and gone to the surface for some reason. You don't know. Halflings. Halflings are kind of like hobbits from Tolkien. I'm going to use Tolkien a lot because that's what everyone knows. Everyone knows Lord of the Rings. Halflings are a small race, which means they are shorter than everyone else. They are a fun-loving race. They like to do a lot of different things. They're all over the place, really. Halflings come in 2 types. They have the Lightfoot and the Stout. Lightfoot are a bit quicker runners, they're a bit more maneuverable, and the Stout are a bit sturdier, they're a bit bigger, beefier. A lot of people will say lean away from playing humans because they're boring. I don't agree with that because humans give you the ability to do anything and be from anywhere. I just think that humans give you a wonderful amount of options. However, I understand that you guys may want to play something really fantastical, so feel free to skip on by the human, but it does lead to a lot of interesting things. Next is the Dragonborn, humanoid dragons. The stories behind the Dragonborn differ based on where they're from. Some stories say that they are the true descendants of dragons. Others say that they were made by dragons to serve them. Regardless of the stories, they are all beings that stand roughly 6 feet tall. They're scaly, with a dragon-like snout, and they have a natural affinity to the elements. If you're playing a Dragonborn, you'll pick a scale color, and that'll give you a resistance to a damage type and the ability to breathe an elemental weapon. If you're a red Dragonborn, you breathe out fire, while if you're blue, you shoot out a blast of lightning. If you want to play someone who's tough yet charming and has a really neat ability, Dragonborn. The Gnome, another one of the small races. They're another one of the long-lived races. They are vibrant, funny, they're usually very welcoming. They're a bunch of odd chaps. With half-elves, because of their mixing of both human and elf, they're not elf enough for most elf cities, but not human enough for most humans. And as such, they learn to be masters of diplomacy. Half-elves give you bonuses to charisma. They gain you extra skill proficiencies. They blend basically the best parts of being human and elf. Joining them in that demi-human or part-human form is the half-orc. Children of humans and orc, they take on the more physical characteristics of their orcish lineage with a greenish skin and usually tusks. Like humans, though, they're not as wild and vile as most orcs who love to commit slaughter. The orcs worship a god called Grumish, the one-eyed god, and he likes to kill things. But they do gain benefits to strength-based weapons. They gain a brutal critical, which means if you roll a critical with a strength weapon, you get to roll the dice again. They are a very powerful race, one of the stronger of the races. And lastly is the Tiefling. Demon children, spawn of devils. A Tiefling, it was human, but someone in their ancestry either had relations with a demon or devil, or made a deal with one of them, and that fiendish energy influenced their lineage. Tieflings can have any skin tone from normal human skin tone to bright blue or red or black. Their eyes are all one color. So it's all yellow or all red or all bright blue. Some of them have tails, some of them have horns, some of them have cloven feet, so like goat legs. And that's all up to you. What they do have is that because of their lineage, they have a small connection to the fiends, to devils and demons. They can cast a couple of unique spells innately. They're very charming. In history, Vikings would sometimes enter what's called the Berserker Rage, which is a mental state where they would feel less pain and hit harder. The Barbarian is that same aspect. Multiple times during the day you can enter a rage, where you go and damage is reduced and you hit a little bit harder. Right? These are warriors who, whether the rage is true anger, or it's sorrow, pain, I've even seen one person who describes as a happy rage. How you rage or why is up to your character and your story, but you enter this altered mental state where you hit hard and don't get hurt as much. The Bard, masters of music and performance, they wield the power of song and magic. Bards specialize in illusion and enchantment spells, spells that twist the mind and twist the eye. They have a lot of really useful skills. They can both be really great as healing characters, but they can also throw you off with a couple of different unique spells. One of their greatest abilities is called Inspiration. A bard can give you a dice that you can add to your rolls to make you more likely to succeed. Basically, they'll sing you a song or do a performance that makes you feel like, yeah, I can do this. Bards are really neat if you play them right, because they can add a lot of great hilarity, they can be very persuasive, great liars, and they can be a great supporting character. The Cleric. You are a priest or follower of one of the many different deities that exist in this realm. You wield divine magic, magic drawn straight from your god. Clerics are your primary healers. They have access to the most healing magic and healing-based spells, as well as a bunch of spells that boost your abilities. And as I said, you're kind of a priest in that sense. Druid. Druids are sort of similar to clerics, but they don't wield divine magic, they wield natural magic. While clerics draw their power from the gods, the druids draw their power from nature itself, beyond the gods. They have the ability to what's called wild shape. They can take on the form of an animal, as well as they wield very powerful magic. The fighter is your basic warrior, a master of the sword and shield, or the lance, or the axe. While your class is very simple, the ability for you to custom build your fighter is limitless. Is that a question? You just waving?
No, just filling the memory.
The monk. Monks are monastic warriors. They fight using primarily martial arts and wield an energy known as ki. Ki is this idea of life energy that travels through our bodies. A monk can manipulate their own life energy and use it when striking you. If you guys have seen movies with Shaolin monks and things like that, all those martial artists, that is what a monk is. All right? They primarily specialize in being up close and personal. And while they're not the toughest of entities, they are the one the hardest to hit. Like the cleric, you're the follower of a god, but as opposed to being a priest, you're more of a crusader. While the cleric is there to spread the word of your god, you are the god's hammer. Most paladins are warriors, going out there to kill the enemies of their gods. Right? As a paladin, you have more ability to do upfront combat, and you wield what's called divine smite. By surging with divine energy through your body, you can deal additional damage to your enemies. You get a little bit of magic, divine magic, but nowhere near as much as the cleric. The ranger. You're a master of the outdoors. Your specialty is traveling through the woods, through the deserts, or wherever you're from. Rangers just excel at this. They have abilities called favored terrain and favored enemy. In your favored terrain, you have benefits because this is your home. You know exactly how it works. Your favorite enemy are beings you've spent years learning to track and to hunt. As a ranger, one of the options you get is called an animal companion. If you choose to be a Beastmaster Ranger, you can have an animal fight with you, a bear or a wolf or something. If you like the idea of being one with nature and fighting alongside it, it's a lot of fun to class. I am playing a Ranger Beastmaster in one of my campaigns. It's a nautical campaign, which means it's all boat-based. My character is a water genasi. It means he's a human with an infusion of elemental energy, and his companion is a 4-foot-tall crab. The rogue is your sneak thief, your assassin, your skill monkey. They have the most skills and capabilities. They gain the ability called sneak attack, where if you catch one of your enemies unaware, you deal a significant amount of extra damage. Rogues are squishy. They're not usually the toughest character. They're not designed to fight up close and personal, but they are useful in many situations. The sorcerer. You wield arcane magic, magic that is through your bloodline. You're descended from a dragon, or maybe you were just born in an area where there's a bunch of magical energy. Regardless of what it is, you can draw magic from yourself and fundamentally alter it using meta magic. The warlock. Another caster, but your ability comes from a deal you made with an entity. Maybe it's a great old one, maybe it's an archfey, or maybe it's some kind of fiend. Whatever being you made a deal with, they grant you a limited amount of power in exchange for services. The warlock is weird because unlike other casters, who once you use your spells they're gone for the day, the warlocks get them back after a while, but you have a lot less magic. So you kind of trade your magic recharging sooner for having less of it. And the last one is the wizard. While the sorcerer is born with their magic, the wizard must learn it manually. You carry around a spell book which you copy your spells into, and as long as you have it, you can cast them. One of the benefits of being a wizard, though, is because you're not memorizing your spells, you can have a much larger amount of spells if you're willing to spend the money to copy them into your spellbook. Wizards are an expensive class to play because of the amount of money required to copy spells into a spellbook. But if you play them right, you have a large amount of spells you can pull from and use. These are the scholarly casters, right? High intelligence. So the last thing we're going to go over is the backgrounds. There you go. As I said, a background is a choice you make when you build your character, and it tells you a little bit of how they grew up or where they came from. So the first background is called the acolyte. You were trained or raised in a church. You gain abilities that grant you insight, your ability to read people and religion, as well as bonus languages. Most acolytes are most commonly used for clerics and paladins. You have the charlatan. You're a con man. You're good at charming people. You've sold trinkets that were worthless, but to everyone you told them to, they were magical. Your expertise is in tricking people, and that's how you've made your living. The criminal. You're a criminal. You worked with a thieves guild. You stole or killed. That's your basis. The entertainer. You're a performer, maybe a singer or a juggler or an actor. Whatever it may be, your specialty is entertaining people. You're good with acrobatics and performance. You have a musical instrument you can use. Next is the folk hero. You're someone from a simple background, maybe a small farming town, but some event in your past made you a hero. Or maybe it hasn't happened yet, but you know you're destined for greatness. With the folk hero, you get proficiencies with animal handling and survival, as well as you get the ability to learn one tool set, so you can be a craftsman of some sort. This is someone from a very simple background, so people in small towns like you because you're like them. The guild artisan or guild merchant is someone who works for a guild. A guild is a collaboration of different people. You can have guilds for artisans, people who make things, guilds for adventurers, people who go out and defeat monsters, guilds for hunters or mercenaries. So as a guild merchant, your job is buying and selling things. As a guild artisan, it's making things. So you gain proficiency with a tool of your choice, and you're good at persuading people and reading people, because you're a businessman first and foremost. The hermit. You lived alone or in a small group of people, like a monastery, most of your life. You spent most of your life in quiet contemplation or study. As such, you may have discovered something. You don't know what it is, but you might have discovered something interesting. The noble. You're from a rich family. D&D is mostly based around the medieval period, so you're looking at the days of kings and queens and nobility, where the land was ruled by these kind of people. So maybe you come from a family where you have a lot of money. Your family is ancient. Maybe your family are a group of knights that once lived. You have a lot of pull politically. So you have a position of privilege. The outlander. This is a person who travels through the woods, who goes around and they're a hunter or a trapper or something of the sort, or a trader. Specialize in athletics and survival. You get a musical instrument because you need a way to entertain yourself when you're traveling through the woods. And you're really good at remembering the terrain. A sage is someone who studied the world and how it works. They spent years in libraries and in workshops. You gain bonuses to Arcana and History. The sailor. You're a sailor. You spent time on a ship. There's also a different version called the pirate, where you could have been a pirate and your thing was raiding ships and plundering. As a sailor, you're good at knowing where you are and climbing up masts. The soldier. You were part of an army once. Maybe you were just a basic cook, or maybe you were one of their generals. Regardless, you at one point served, and people who are connected to that army respect that of you. And finally, the urchin. You were a poor kid who grew up on the streets. Maybe you were an orphan. Maybe your family was just not a lot of money. Regardless, you learned to survive on the streets of the cities or towns. You learned to steal and move quietly. All right? And because of that, you know how to travel through a city much faster than everyone else.